Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this video, I'll show you how to use my Quran Journal ebook. The ebook is completely free and is available on my Gumroad page. You can access the download link from the link in the bio on my Instagram page at Rise to Shine with Quran. So this can be used by two ways. Either you print the pages and write directly on them, or use the prompts provided and write your answers in your own notebook journal. This journal is designed to help you study an entire surah rather than reflecting on individual verses. It helps you gather information about a surah. For example, now we will start here. On the first page, we have a page for surah name, and then you can write down the English meaning of this surah. The surah number can be written here, the juice number, and then the number of verses. And then here you can write down the revelation period, whether it is Makki or Madani, and you know the importance of the surah being Makki or Madani. And if you do not know the importance, then you can go back to my beginner course video in which I have explained the importance of the surah being Makki or Madani. Then, if the surah has any other name, like for example, Surah Fatiha can also be called as Al Quran or any other surah. So, if you have any other name for the surah, you can write it down over here. Then the next section will be you will have to write the link between this surah and previous surah, where you can get this information usually from tafsir books. Then you will go on to write down the overview of the surah, that is the background. And in the background, you will write down where the surah was revealed, what was happening during the revelation of this surah, the conditions of the Muslims, just a brief background of the surah when it was revealed. Here you will write down the key themes, that is the general themes of the surah, like what this surah speaks about, like for example, whether it speaks about judgment day, whether it speaks about a prophet, a story of a prophet, etc. Anything in general, just write down the general themes. This section is for the mind map, and this section is a little big because it depends upon the surah. If the surah is small, then it will be a small mind map, or if it's big, it's a big mind map. Mind map, sorry. And then the mind map, you can just write down from this ayat to this ayat what the verses are telling you. You can group the verses and write down the mind map for each group of verses. Like verse 1 to 5 speaks about a prophet, 5 to 11 speaks about some command of Allah, 11 to 21 speaks about the judgment day, etc. So this is the mind map. Next, you will go to the prophets or nations mentioned in the surah. So just go to the surah and mention what are the prophets or the nations mentioned in the surah. For example, Tamud is mentioned or a prophet is mentioned. Then the next section goes to any stories mentioned in the surah. Like, for example, in Surah Kahf, we have 4 stories mentioned. So you can just write the outline of the story, not the detailed story, the outline of the story, like people of Kahf, the Musa and Khidr alayhi salam story. And you can write the Zulkarnain story, then you can write people of the garden story. So just write down only the outline of the story. Whatever story may be mentioned, you just write down the outline of the story here. Then you will write down the lessons I learned from the story. Here in this section, you'll write down what are the lessons which you learned. In the next section, you'll write down which verse relates to the title of the surah. That is, by chance, if Surah Baqarah, which verse is mentions Baqarah, and what is the context like. Just in a few words, you can just write down about the verse, and you can write down why the surah was called so and so. Then in this section, you can write down any commands of Allah mentioned. For example, like if there is a riba, if riba is mentioned in Surah Baqarah, it's a rule, it's a regulation. Like what about riba? What do you know about the command of riba? Like idda, the period of idda, etc. And in this section, you can write down if Iblis is mentioned in this surah and why is he mentioned over here. Here you can mention, in this section, you can mention the names and attributes of Allah, write down the meaning, and every surah will have at least some names of Allah mentioned. So write it down over here. Then make a dua using the names of Allah mentioned. This is like just your own activity. Here in this section, write down if the day of judgment is mentioned and in what context it is mentioned. Okay. So the in this section, in the next section, you will write down if paradise is mentioned and its name, what is its name here in this surah and its description. And in the next section, you will write about hellfire and its name and description. You know, there are several names by which paradise, hellfire, and judgment are mentioned in the Quran. So they are described in the Quran. So how does this surah describe them? This is what you will actually write in these sections. Then in the next page, in the next section, we will write down any animal or insect mentioned in the surah, why and what is the context. Like for example, in Surah Namal, ant is mentioned. Why is it mentioned? Or in Ankabut, spider is mentioned. Or in Surah Baqarah, mosquito is mentioned. So like this, you will just write down what context it's mentioned in. Here, this section, you'll write down any fruit, vegetable, oil, or edible item mentioned. What is the context? Then here, if any creation, other creation of Allah is mentioned, like the sun, moon, mountains, etc., in what context? Just only brief, short outline you have to mention over here. Okay. Then the next is if any dua is mentioned in the surah, who made it, what is the background, and what is its significance. You should know what's the background. Like, for example, Ibrahim alayhi salam dua, when he made it in Surah Baqarah, why did he made it? Then write the dua with the translation. If it's more than one dua, it's better you make it in your journal, write it down in your journal. If there are more than one duas mentioned, then one ayat which moves me in the whole surah. There will be some ayat which will move you, which you want to know more information about. So you just write down that ayat in this section. Okay. So next, any lessons I learned from this surah, you'll write down over here the lessons you learned from this surah. For example, from Surah Kahaf, I learned this, then this lesson, etc. So whatever lesson you learned, you write down it here. Then here in this last section, it will be the personal reflections about this surah. And this also will just be short. This is just only to get an overview of the surah. We are just trying to get an overview of the surah. We are trying to get to know what are its contents, whether it has any commands, any prophets mentioned, any animals mentioned, etc. So by this way, you will come to know about the surah. You'll be journaling. Then you will start with the actual surah verse by verse, and you will go to the second tool, that is the context of the verse. Or sometimes, if some theme you get to like some theme, use that as a Quranic theme, and you can journal with that Quranic theme. Okay, thank you. Jazakallah khair.